On today's show, we'll be joined by our once weekly co-host Alykhan Bijani to break down the battle for the backup point guard spot for your Houston Rockets between Daishen Nix and TyTy Washington. What each one of those guys brings to the table, who has the edge as far as their passing, their half-court and transition offense, their defense, their shooting, all these different variables that come to the table. We're going to break down all of that and more coming up right here at Locked On Rockets.
This is Mission Control, Houston.
Ignition sequence start.
The Houston Rockets select Jalen Green and Jabari Smith Jr.
T-minus 15 seconds. Guidance is internal.
Every time I step on that floor, I'm coming.
You're getting somebody who's going to come in with a chip on their shoulder, somebody who's going to come in and compete from day one.
6, 5, 4, 3, 2, 1.
Welcome to Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. I'm your non-Jackson Gatlin host, Alykhan Bijani, native Houstonian, fan of Spain pick and rolls, and a brunch connoisseur. Joining me today, the actual host of Locked On Rockets, Jackson Gatlin, native Houstonian as well, host of Locked On NBA, and Houston's most eligible bachelor on Hinge. How are you today, Jackson?
I'm having an out-of-body experience, Alykhan, having somebody else do the intro for this show in the first time in almost 3 years. The last person that had done an intro for this show that was not named Jackson Gatlin was Ben Dubose, the original host of the show. So I love that you wanted to take it upon yourself. And I do think, if I do say so myself, I think that was a fantastic intro. I'm excited to talk a little basketball today, Alykhan.
I am too, man. You know, I'm in a good spirit, man. It's been a good week. You know, it's been a great week, and I'm excited to talk some Rockets basketball with everybody.
All right, so now as we kind of reverse roles here so that I can actually set the table and do my usual host duties, today we're going to talk a little bit about Daishen Nix and TyTy Washington, kind of the battle for that backup point guard spot, if you will. This has been an episode that we've kind of teased up to you guys for a while now, something that a lot of people have, kind of found as, a topic of contention maybe amongst Rockets fans. There's a lot of people who are very pro TyTy Washington, and there's a lot of people who are very pro Daishen Nix. And this kind of feels like it's going to be the next battle of positions, if you will, for the Houston Rockets, trying to see, which guy ultimately becomes the backup, who has better skills, when it comes to their defense, their passing, their half-court offense, their transition play, their shooting, their ability to attack off the bounce, all these different things that we're going to talk about and kind of, dissect a little bit today. But where we got to start is just our impressions, right? Our thoughts from what we saw out of TyTy Washington, specifically at Vegas Summer League. We'll maybe kind of branch back a little bit too about some of his play with Kentucky as well. But Alykhan, to me, when I came away from Summer League, first off, I was incredibly impressed by all three of the Rockets rookies, but TyTy just had this feel for the game, right? Like there were moments where maybe Tari looked a little out of control, trying to do the right things on the floor, but maybe playing with a little bit too much energy. And that's kind of the thing you expect from a guy like that, a player like that. Jabari at times, maybe that first game, deer in headlights a little bit, trying to find himself offensively, looked very comfortable on the defensive end. TyTy just went out there and hooped, man. He looked like he was comfortable on the floor every moment that he was out there, very confident in his game and what he brings to the table.
For those of you who have watched Indian Matchmaking on Netflix, I'm going to channel my inner Seema auntie and give you TyTy's bio data of what the Rockets were looking at when they were looking to draft him in the first round. Second team, all SEC, helped Kentucky to an SEC conference championship, started in 29 of 31 games as a true freshman last season, 12.5 points, 3.9 assists, 3.5 rebounds per game, shooting 45% from the field, 35% from three, 6'3" with a 6'8" wingspan. So that's his bio data. Now let's look at what he did in Summer League. I'm going to bring up a few things. I think these are really important things to bring up in our conversation today, and then we'll discuss it, in terms of what we saw in terms of with our eyes. Spot up, 71%. 71 percentile during Summer League. As a ball handler, it's a pretty shocking number, and I kind of don't want to say it and this is a great way to explain these stats have a lot of context to them. He was in the 0 percentile and as a pick and roll ball handler.
As a pick and roll ball, like points per possession.
Yeah, in terms of points per possession.
You know what? I'm calling it right now. That's because nobody could hit any of the shots that he was facilitating out of those pick and rolls. I'm putting that right there.
Dude, you know, that sounds embarrassing, right? That sounds embarrassing. It sounds like that somebody, like, we're at a department store. Let's say we're at Marshall's and we drop a coffee on the floor or something. Everybody's looking at us like, what's wrong with us? You know, that's like, you know, you're embarrassed. Everybody's staring at you, you know? That's kind of how I feel when I look at that stat. But that being said, I don't blame any of that on TyTy. TyTy actually had some really great pick and roll possessions. It's not his fault if a teammate is knocking down a shot. Only, I would say, around 2 of those possessions had a turnover, right? The rest of them, hear me out, 1 of 11 shooting as pick and roll ball handler, right? And so when we look at it from that perspective, right, and if you include passes, right, 2 of 17 shooting with his teammates, 2 of 17 shooting on those 22 possessions where he ran pick and roll. So clearly he still has a lot of ways to improve, but it's not all on him. So this is a perfect example of where stats and context matters. Transition, excellent, 85th percentile. And that showed, right? That showed in his eye level as well. When we were watching him play Jackson, you could see he got the ball and he immediately attacked, right? There was no hesitation. There was just quick go. He has a wonderful floater, which we'll talk about. And then defensively, I want to highlight some defensive stats for everybody. Very good on the perimeter. You know, he was pretty decent in isolation, I would have to say, especially for his size. And size not in terms of length or his height, but more so in terms of like just body size. He's going to get there. He's going to add muscle. You know, it's part of the program. I think give him a year or two, and he'll be a solid body type in terms of what you want in a point guard. But, you know, just granted, you know, where he was and how he's playing, and he played more of an off-ball 2 role with Daishen Nix, oftentimes on the court in Summer League. It was pretty good in terms of the stats to see how well he played. But let's talk about the eye test now, Jackson. Let's talk about the stats. Let's talk about the eye test. What did you see from TyTy when you were there on the court watching him play? Did he communicate defensively? How was he in offense? When he was playing off ball, was he moving? Whenever he was trying to initiate the offense, was he getting people in their proper positions? In Summer League is very much a base set, right? You're running very base 21 series. You're running very basic pistol action, delay, very basic NBA sets, nothing complex. But when you were watching him play, what did you take away from him in terms of how he was in those intangibles like you talked about earlier?
I do think he looked, of all the Rockets guards, he easily looked the most comfortable playing off the ball, right? Where, you know, you have other guys like Josh Christopher, Daishen Nix, guys who are incredibly comfortable once the ball is in their hands. But I do think that TyTy did a great job understanding where to position himself on the floor when he didn't have the ball, being ready for those opportunities to catch and attack off closeouts and kind of keep the possession going, keep the defense scrambling. Especially, again, defenses have to honor him. He's got that fantastic floater that we're going to, spend a little time discussing. But to me, that was kind of the area, that was even more impressive than when the ball was actually in his hands, because to me, that kind of screamed that he can be kind of a combo guard, right? He can be a guy who is out there comfortable with the ball in his hands, comfortable putting guys in the right spots, both in the half court, which he didn't get to do as much as I would have liked to see, unfortunately, because Daishen Nix and Josh Christopher kind of commanded the basketball for the majority of those first 3 games. We saw a little bit more of TyTy on ball in the half court in the final couple games. But then in transition, right, as you alluded to, he looked great. He got guys, in the right spots, pushing the ball up the court, in a hurry, trying to attack before defenses got set. No fear in transition, and consistently making the right passes to guys, filling the wings, either into the court, getting guys attacking in transition in those easy moments for them to try and create something, when the defense wasn't set. So again, for me, it's kind of just his IQ playing off the ball seemed to really stand out to me.
And that's something that a lot of scouts liked when watching him. They knew he could handle the ball and he could be a floor general. And that's something we'll probably see from him this season. I think you'll depending on how the point guard battle shakes out, and we'll talk about that through the course of the episode. But he may spend some time in the G League. And I think that'll be good for him because he'll have a chance to actually run the team on his own. We saw that with Josh Christopher last year, somebody who played more of a tool guard off-ball role when he was playing with Jalen Green and Kevin Porter Jr. in Houston when he came later in the season. But look at him in the G League. Played point guard, handling the ball, had a lot of usage. I think that those opportunities to be able to make reads is really going to be able to help TyTy. One thing you mentioned about Daishen getting more opportunities, which I think is interesting, even with, and this is a stat where it had the 0 percentile for TyTy. Daishen, he was only in the 35th percentile when it comes to as a pick and roll ball handler. So still not good, right? And we thought that Daishen played, pretty well. I mean, there were some moments. I know that it's been a debate amongst Rockets fans about how Daishen looked versus TyTy, and we'll get into that. But even Daishen didn't have that impressive of stats when it comes to pick and roll. So that's why I just wanted to say we owe Jackson. I love sharing the stats with our listeners, but it's always important to look at the context of that, right? What those contexts mean. It's great to look at the stats, but it's also important to look at the eye test, and that's what we're hoping to accomplish as we go through this next episode. So Jackson, what do we talk about in the next segment? What's going on?
We're going to keep the focus on TyTy Washington a little bit. We do want to, talk about that floater game that we've talked about a couple times here, as well as start shifting over into Daishen Nix, some of the things that stood out about his game, some of the things that just stand out about him as a player. And then we're going to kind of get to segment 3 there and kind of wrap it all up, put a pretty little bow on it. Our thoughts on who should be the backup point guard for the Rockets going into the season. We're going to get there in just a moment after a quick message from our friends over at NHTSA. Look, we've all been there, right? You're hanging out with some friends, you're putting back a few drinks, and sometimes a few becomes a few too many. As the evening comes to an end and people start to head out, you think of calling for a ride, hit up, rideshare service, whatever. Nah, you live nearby. You can make it home okay, right? You're not that far away. What are the odds that you'll get pulled over anyways? And even so, what's the worst that could happen, right? Insurance premiums go up. Maybe you lose your license. You lose your job, tow your car. Maybe you kill someone. Right? Everyone knows about the risks of driving drunk. The results are tragic and often deadly. However, that still doesn't stop everyone from getting behind the wheel while under the influence. That's why police officers are out there right now looking for impaired drivers on our roads to save lives. So if you think you're okay to drive after a few drinks, please think again. Play it safe and plan ahead to get a ride. It only takes one mistake to change your life or someone else's forever. Drive sober or get pulled over.
And continuing here on Locked On Rockets, your daily home for everything Houston Rockets basketball. Back here with the actual host, Jackson Gatlin, who's making me do his job, Jackson.
Hey, man, you know what? When Alykhan signed up and he said that he was willing to come back and, put up with my shenanigans once a week, I told him, I was like, hey, this is going to be different this time around. I'm going to need you to pull some of your own weight, Alykhan. So every so often you might get the fun little treat of Alykhan trying to shoulder my enormous hosting duties later. What's really going to be funny is when I make Alykhan do the video editing and it just comes out and it's a total dumpster fire. So that'll be all kinds of fun. No. I kid. I
got too much stuff on you, Jackson. You keep playing, man. I'm gonna say some stuff on these shows. You
know what? I'm zipping it up and I'm throwing away the key. We're not talking any more trash. All right, Alykhan. So we've talked about TyTy's floater a couple times in segment 1, and I think right now that is actually the weapon that to me gives him arguably a really significant edge over Daishen Nix currently.
Interesting.
Because Daishen to me doesn't have like a go-to reliable move yet that he is kind of his bread and butter. And I think for two guys, both their size, even though Daishen Nix is a bigger guy, bigger body, has the ability at times to get to the rim, all the way to the hole and bounce guys off of him using his size, his strength, his speed. Getting all the way to the rack is tough at the NBA. And then even when you get there, right, if you got a help defender coming over, there's all sorts of other obstacles in your way. Having the ability to create your own shot in the mid-range like TyTy Washington can for a guy his size at his position is almost invaluable. So that, and again, the fact that he's so consistent with it and that looks so good this early, it takes a lot of players, sometimes it takes them a while to find what their bread and butter shot is, what their go-to move is, whatever, at the NBA level. And it feels like TyTy already has that in his bag. So to me, there are some areas that I think Daishen Nix is still, has the edge over TyTy. But as far as that go-to move and that reliability of that move, I think it goes fairly in TyTy's corner.
We're getting to the whole Daishen Nix and TyTy discussion. I actually disagree with you on Daishen not having a move, and we'll get into that. But on TyTy's floater, to give you some more bio data. All right. Shot 57% on 47 floater attempts last season. Finished in the top 25 nationally in points scored off his floater. Mid-range, because floater, kind of seeps into the mid-range. 50 pull-up jumpers last season between 8 and 16 feet. Shot almost right under 60%. And I mean, that is a great weapon to have, right? When you're playing defenses now in the NBA who are going to not only switch, but if they're not switching and they're using a big, they're going to try to play the big high. And that big is going to give up some space a little bit when they're retreating back to the basket. And if you can stop on the dime, which is TyTy has shown he can, and you can pull up for a jumper or get a floater off over a lengthy defender, that's a great tool to have. And so I'm interested to see how much of that translates. I think initially it may be a little tough for him. I don't think he's going to shoot almost 60% on floaters and pull-up jumpers between 8 and 16 feet. But I think he can get to maybe around 50%, 55%. And that even then is still pretty good. So that I think that the floater aspect is really important, because let's look at a very common NBA defense that we're seeing now. And we talked about this. I've teased it a little bit the last few shows. The way defenses are being played now is you're attacking gaps, right? Defenses are trying to take away gaps within the half court, basically showing, oh, this may be a gap, but then filling that gap and taking away different passing lanes where players may want to go. Because players are going to try to fill in slots in the 5-out offense to be able to get a 3-point off. So defenses are trying to take away those lanes for certain players to do that. Well, if that's the case, there's always going to be a soft spot in the defense. And normally those soft spots end up being the mid-range, primarily in a side of the court that one player is not good at. That's what adds layers to this defense. But TyTy is so good with that floater and that pull-up, he can get to either side of the court and still get a floater off. And that's where that can become a weapon for him if he becomes consistent as an NBA player. Because when he sees the court more, he'll get chances to be able to do that. And this kind of goes into our off-ball conversation now. Because during Summer League, even though he was playing off-ball, his floaters came off of opportunities where he was attacking on closeouts, right? Defenses were swarming. They were helping. That tagger was kind of cheating off that corner man. So then you had that one player defending a corner and a wing shooter. When that happens, whoever's passing the ball can pass to either. And then that allows you to be able to attack a closeout if that one defender is basically, taking away the three. In most cases with TyTy, he shot almost 45% of catch and shoot threes. So he drove those and he got some floaters off, got some mid-ranges off. So I think for him, sticking to that, how quick he is with that quick first step, getting to the middle, floater, mid-range, whatever it may be, it's going to be an asset for him.
All right, so you didn't agree with my take that Daishen Nix doesn't have a go-to move yet, which I guess we can get into in a moment. Do we want to kind of lay the groundwork here for Daishen Nix first before you drop in your rebuttal to my claim?
Jackson, do you go pick up weights?
Not consistently. No.
Are you in the weight room? Are you in the weight room?
I should not be in the weight, or I should be in the weight room, but I am not in the weight room.
Have you seen Daishen Nix?
Yeah, he's swole. He's big.
He's a massive human being. Do you know what he likes to do?
Pick up weights.
Well, not just pick up weights, but what does he like to do on a basketball court and a half court?
He likes to drive.
He likes to drive. And what does he do? He just bounces off the body and puts up a shot. And that's his move. He draws contact, right? He's pretty good at it in the G League you saw. He likes to get in the paint and kick out. We saw a lot of that in the highlights with the Vipers last season. That's why he was getting so many assists. He can do that. The NBA is different, obviously. The translation is different, and we can talk about that. But I just think the body type Daishen has it's an interesting body type that I think Rockets coaches want to give him a shot to be able to show that he can emulate that in NBA level. And I think we can talk about that in our next segment.
Okay. All right. Next segment coming up. We're going to keep the focus on Daishen Nix now. We'll probably revisit some of his stats, the things that stand out to us, and give at least our final calls, our way too early calls on who should be the backup point guard for the Houston Rockets rolling into training camp, the season, what have you. We're going to get there after a quick message from our friends over at BetOnline. BetOnline is the fastest and easiest way to check on all of your sports betting needs. Find all your favorite sports and events at the #1 online source for odds, lines, and games. Find reviews and news of every single league, including Major League Baseball, NFL, NBA, NHL, combat sports, esports, even golf. You name it, they've got you covered over at BetOnline. Right now, you can take a look at the odds for who is going to be the 2023 NBA champion. Boston Celtics leading the way at plus 500. You got the Milwaukee Bucks at plus 600. Golden State Warriors at plus 700. And then rounding out the top five, you got the Brooklyn Nets now at plus 750. They're creeping up the standings. It looks like KD will be staying in Brooklyn. And then the LA Clippers also at plus 750, rounding out the top five. So for all of that and more odds, head over to betonline.net to see the trends in action available to you. BetOnline, it's where the game starts.
Welcome back to Locked On Rockets. I am once again not Jackson Gatlin. Jackson is here. He's in the background listening to his favorite song by Ariana Grande called Breathin'.
Whoa. No. I am not an Ariana Grande stan. Not that I don't love her music as well. I am a Taylor Swift stan. We need to establish that first and foremost here on this podcast. T-Swizzle is my girl.
I like Ariana Grande, and "Breathin'" is one of my favorite songs. So,
all right, this is the new civil war in Rockets Twitter is me versus Alykhan, Ariana stan versus T-Swizzle stan. So, all right, let's keep it focused on Daishen Nix here. So I will agree, and I agree with you. I think the driving is impressive, and I think we're at a point with Daishen Nix with what he's shown at the G League level, the flashes that he's shown, that continuing to play at the G League level does not serve him any further purpose. Like he has shown so much potential to where if he goes down to the G League, he's just going to put up a LeBron-like stat line every single game because that's kind of where he's at as a player.
Yeah.
He's only going to get better playing alongside other like high caliber NBA players and really getting a chance to showcase his talent in what I think needs to be a consistent role with this Rockets team, which is why at this point, like I'm leaning the Rockets are, I think the backup point guard spot is kind of his spot to lose. And I think that's, if I'm not mistaken, I think that's kind of your thoughts on the matter as well, right?
Yeah, I'm in the camp that I think right now Daishen Nix will be your backup point guard to start the season. Right now, right? We still have training camp. We still have to get into it. But from what it looks like, right, Daishen Nix. And one thing the Rockets fans have to understand, Eric Gordon is still going to play. He's going to play 6th, 7th man minutes. Right? He's going to be out there. He's going to be playing. And it's important to understand that he will get touches as a primary ball handler. Right? And Jalen and KPJ will be staggered a little bit too. And so when you're looking at that, no matter if Daishen or TyTy is the backup point guard, what is the role going to be? The role is going to be a bit of an off-ball role, which actually, and I'm going to make the argument, could fit better for TyTy. So I talked to a regional scout who watched a lot of Kentucky, and one thing they raved about was his ability to process information and make the correct read. So he played an off-ball role a lot with Kentucky, but in opportunities to run, pick, and roll, he barely turned the ball over, and he found ways to kind of get his teammates and shooters, everybody involved. So don't get me wrong. I mean, that sounds great when you're playing with Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green, like, playing off ball, but I still want to see him play more on ball. And I think we will. I just don't know if he's going to get a lot of that time in the season, like at least the early part of the season.
In that backup point guard role, because that's and I think that to me that is the biggest question, right? Is what does that backup point guard role need to bring to the table, right? If Stephen Silas decides he wants to stagger Kevin Porter Jr. and Jalen Green and have them each have some time on the floor by themselves and kind of have the ball in their hands when they're on the floor, then yeah, I think that backup guard spot is going to be primarily an off-ball role where you need to be ready to catch and shoot, you need to be ready to attack off closeouts, that kind of thing. And at this point, while Daishen Nix has worked tirelessly on that three-point shot, and it looks significantly better than where it was when he started as a G League player, he's worked a lot with John Lucas on improving that shot, getting it to a place where it's reliable, where defenses really have to treat him not as a sharpshooter, but they have to treat him as a shooting threat from the three-point line. Yeah. The form, the release, it looks so much better than it did back in the day. Complete night and day difference. So he's worked on that, but he just doesn't. There's not that same level of comfortability playing off the ball, I think, that TyTy has, where he understands how to kind of move, find some windows, move to, shift to the corner, kind of, move to the opposite side of the court, clear out space for wherever the strong side is, that kind of thing, to open up driving lanes, to keep the spacing correct on the floor. So
Yeah, no, Jackson, what you just mentioned, I had those things written down I wanted to bring up. When you look at what he did, those small things in college, what made him a winning player, what made him all those intangibles he talked about, was that he was willing to play off the ball. He moved without the ball after giving it up. He relocated to the perimeter, maintained spacing, set his teammates up with the way he went around screens. I mean, even as a ball handler, non-ball handler, that's really important. Just a lot of small details that he was good at. And I think for that reason, you can make a strong argument if he plays well in the preseason and he can play effectively off the ball. You can make the argument that he could technically become your backup point guard. And that would put a lot more strain on Eric and Jalen and KPJ to be able to have more responsibility to be ball handlers. But I'm just providing you the data. Let's look at the Summer League, for example. Summer League, it was pretty noticeable that Daishen was a lead ball handler, correct?
Absolutely.
Right? Especially in games that Josh didn't play. So Daishen spent, I would say, 40% of his possessions as a, pick and roll ball handler. Okay, 40% of it, 40.
Which is a lot. I mean, if you're spending half the time of your, almost half the time that you're on the floor as a pick and roll ball handler, that's
sorry, incorrect. Sorry, 30% of possessions as pick and roll, right?
Okay.
Right, TyTy spend around 20%. So if we're looking at that, those numbers, even if Daishen is going to be a backup, he still will let's say technically one of every 5 plays have to run a pick and roll and be effective. Now let's look at both of them in Summer League. Who played the best according to you with your eyes as a pick and roll ball handler in Summer League?
I think it was Daishen Nix.
Okay.
I'm torn, right? I think Daishen Nix found more success in some of his attempts, but I do think TyTy's was maybe held back a little bit by the fact that a lot of the opportunities that he did create were, lineups, as far as the lineups that TyTy was playing with, right? There were just opportunities that TyTy created that weren't then converted, unfortunately. Yeah. Eye test still tells me that Daishen was the better pick and roll ball handler, though, in Summer League.
So that's one component. Now let's look at the off-ball component, which is a very big component. Who wins the off-ball component to you?
I think it's got to go easily to TyTy. I think that one's as we're like navigating this podcast, I keep coming more and more still thinking like, man, like TyTy's got like a really strong argument here, right? Because if the margins are kind of that close as far as, pick and roll ball handler, and then we get to their off-ball component and it's TyTy in a landslide, then, at that point, it seems like there might be more points in TyTy's favor.
I think it's going to come down to shooting. Who's shooting well from catch and shoot? Daishen was only 33% on catch and shoot, I believe, in Summer League, right? So that's one. And I think we're missing one important thing. I think the YouTube comments or Apple Podcast comments or Twitter or wherever you are listening to the show, if you've been listening this long, you're probably like, why aren't they talking about the defense? Well, here we go. And this is going to be a big one. I brought up his body for a reason. Daishen right now, in my opinion, is more equipped to be an NBA defender, at least an average NBA defender with the second unit, than TyTy is. And for me, and for that reason, we discussed the offensive stuff, right? And it's pretty, we discussed it. For that reason, defensively, I have to lean towards Daishen.
Yeah, I think that especially from a physicality standpoint, I think Daishen Nix has the ability to thrive potentially as well in a switching scheme where he might have to guard bigger and stronger players on switches. TyTy could be the type of guy that you easily target, right? If he's on the floor and you have the ability, if the Rockets are trying to switch, you get TyTy on a switch with a bigger player and he gets taken down low and abused. I will say that TyTy showed a really good grasp of kind of his ability to be kind of shifty on the defensive side of things and kind of play some passing lanes, generate some steals that way, poke checking, that kind of stuff. Just very quick and active with his hands throughout Summer League. But if I had to give the nod to who I think is going to be the better, or who currently is the better overall defender, all encompassing, I'm going to lean Daishen Nix as well.
Yeah, I'm just looking at it from a simple size perspective and the strength, and then we know how Steven Silas is. He likes experience. DJ Augustin got a lot of playing time, right? A lot of veterans will get playing time. Daishen's not a veteran. I think that 1 year will give him a little bit of a push over TyTy. But that being said, I'm very high on TyTy. The Rockets haven't had a good point guard prospect besides Kevin Porter Jr. in 2 seasons. And now they do. They have somebody who legitimately can be a point guard of the future. And that's something I hope our listeners take away today is that, you had Kevin Porter Jr. last year. You had Kevin Porter Jr. that second half of the 2020-21 season. Now you have TyTy, legitimate prospect. And let's see what he can do. And I'm very excited to watch him play. And look at the next draft. We always talk about Victor, right? Scoot Henderson, amazing prospect, point guard, right? And if the Rockets finish what most are expecting them to finish at the bottom of the Western Conference and have a shot at the top of the draft to draft a good player, if by the end of the season you decide Kevin Porter Jr. is not your point guard and then maybe TyTy showing promise but they're not there yet, you can go out and get a potential generational prospect in Scoot Henderson, right?
Absolutely. And the last little tidbit that I want to throw in here, which again, I think we walk away from this both saying that, or both agreeing, right, that it's Daishen Nix's job to lose at this point, although there are a lot of data points in favor of TyTy Washington, and the argument might be a lot closer than it feels like right now for who kind of deserves that spot. And based on some of what Steven Silas' comments have been about players having to earn their roles on this team, earning their positions, nothing is going to be given to anybody except for maybe again, the top 3 or 4 guys who are of course going to be given their spot, their healthy amount of minutes in KPJ, Jalen, Jabari, and Alp. But past those guys, right, I think an underrated component of this is having 2 guys who are both kind of vying for that one backup guard spot in Daishen and TyTy will make them both each better, right? Because they both know that they are competing directly against one another for who is going to get those backup guard minutes. And if Daishen struggles for the first, maybe it's Daishen's spot, right? For the first 10 or so games of the season, maybe he comes out of the gate struggling, right? Maybe he's not equipped to be that backup guard spot. Maybe it's more of a demanding off-ball type role and he can't flourish in that role. Then what I hope we'll see is Steven Silas then be like, all right, you got your crack at it. Let me shake things up and plug in TyTy Washington and see how he does. And then, maybe we get a chance to see him take over that role. That's kind of one of the, and that's not to dive into a whole Steven Silas discussion because that's an entire topic for multiple other podcasts down the road.
I wanted to bring up a few things about the concept of a point guard in the Rockets offense. I think we've talked about it at length today, even though he's an off-ball player in Kentucky and he played that in Summer League for the most part. TyTy is a great point guard prospect. Point guard, right? Daishen, potentially a point guard, likes to drive, likes to be in that combo guard type of role, right? Let's look at the passers on this team. You have Alperen Sengun. You're going to have KPJ and Jalen. And one guy who I think will take a big step because we've talked about it enough, he's been working out with Draymond, he's been doing a lot of work in terms of his offensive skill, is Jae'Sean Tate. I think Jae'Sean is going to have a big year as a passer, as a connector on offense. And so between Sengun and Tate, if one of them is on the court with the second unit, right, when they're staggering the lineups with the starters, I think that's going to make it easier on whoever they pick as a guard and allow them to play in a more natural role and allow them to slowly seep in. So I think Jae'Sean and Alp have to be a big part of this. When we're looking at it from an X's and O's perspective, the way the Rockets were going to play and kind of playing through those wings is going to be very important for me to be able to watch as we head into preseason and the regular season. And by the way, first preseason game I think is just in about 34 days. Not for the Rockets, but just overall. And I think the Rockets' first preseason game is in about 5 weeks. So very, very, very exciting times. We're almost there, guys. We're almost to training camp. We're almost to potential. I'm assuming the Rockets probably will get together. They've been together, clearly. Rockets social media have been posting highlights and pictures. Shout out to Gary Bird's new hair.
We got mullet Gary Bird. We're gonna start having to call him Dirty Bird.
Oh my God. We got Jalen looking strong. We got Jabari looking good. We got Sterling Brown out there showing up in pictures. I mean, it's a lot of stuff going on Rocket social media with the pictures and videos. It's pretty cool to see the teams together. And
the real question is, did Sterling Brown just dust off his old shorts, or did they give him some new shorts for that photo op?
I wonder if they have a warehouse where they go and put their old player stuff in the case that the old player comes back. Hint, James Harden. I wonder if that's going to happen for him. They have all his stuff, in storage, and when the time comes, and if he comes back, if they do it. But yeah.
Does that mean that
James looks good, by the way.
Hey, and you know what? Shout out to James too, just for the fact that he was here in Houston for his, JH Town weekend, giving back to the community. He has look, even though the ending kind of sucked, right? Forced his way out of Houston. He still embraces Houston as his home, right? He loves this city. He loves the people here. He is one of, he's an incredibly philanthropic athlete, constantly giving back to the community. And to see him, back in the Houston community, giving back, sharing love for the city, all of that, it's always a great thing to recognize that, hey, I mean, because look, he's still the second greatest player in franchise history. And maybe the story hasn't ended yet for James Harden as a Houston Rocket. Maybe he comes back down the line somewhere, and old man James Harden to kind of help shepherd this young Rockets team, into their first, series of playoff bouts and whatnot further down the line. We're not going to entertain that hypothetical right now, but it's still it's really cool to see an athlete truly embrace the city the way that Harden has.
Is James Harden Rockets legend?
Yeah, of course. There's, you know what? I might have to.
I'm just teasing you, man. This is a joke. We talked about Eric Gordon a few weeks ago. I'm just teasing.
You're the absolute worst. And in fact, as a tease for our next episode, because we didn't tease anything earlier in the episode, which is completely on. I'm going to blame Alykhan since he was your temporary host for today. Alykhan begged me to do some Sengun content in today's show, and I was like, we'll push you back a week. Because today's show we've been talking about wanting to talk about the point guard battle for a while. So we've got some Sengun content coming for you next week. We're going to talk about
passing, man. Did you see those behind the back passes? Did you see those no look passes? Did you see those blocks?
Yo, clearly, Alykhan is excited about Alperen Sengun, the Goon Squad. We're going to talk about that next week. But Alykhan, you know the drill. Let everybody know where to track you down at.
You can find me at brunch. No, I'm kidding. You can find me on Twitter at Rockets_insider. You can find me also helping Jackson with his Hinge profile. And please make sure that you're following Locked On Rockets on Twitter, Instagram, YouTube, wherever you get your Locked On Rockets. Oh, by the way, shout out to Jackson and the Rockets watch team. Those have been some really dope stuff.
Hey.
Man. I've joined a few of them. It's been pretty cool, man. Y'all did a great job. If you haven't watched any of them, make sure you guys tune in. It's pretty cool.
Hey, we appreciate Alykhan, but as always, thank you so much, and we will see you again next week. That is going to do it for today's episode. I do not have a Hinge profile. Alykhan is lying to you. Just going to chime that in here at the very, very end now that he is off the screen and cannot insert a rebuttal. But as always, thank you so much for checking out the show. If you haven't done so yet, please consider subscribing wherever you listen to your podcast. That's Apple, Spotify, Google, the Odyssey app, free and available on all platforms. I should have made Alykhan do this part of the show because this is always a mouthful. Also, check us out on YouTube. Go to YouTube, search Locked On Rockets. Be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Remember the mantra, for the house, for the team, for the algorithm. Go comment on the YouTube show. It helps out tremendously. But as always, thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you so much for putting up with Alykhan hosting today's show. And as always, we look forward to having you back right here at Locked On Rockets, your daily podcast home for everything Houston Rockets basketball.